What is going on, Notre Dame football fans? I'm Tyler Horka. That's Jack Sobel. We're with blueandgold.com, Blue and Gold Illustrated, here on Notre Dame's campus where we just watched the Fighting Irish's second fall camp practice of the year. Second practice in as many days. They're really front-loading this thing for us today. But that's awesome because we get to see what this team looks like kind of from the jump in their preparation to get ready for August 31st's game against Texas A&M, which it just went through my mind. It's August already. Today is August 1st. So we were out there at the Irish Athletic Center and the adjacent LeBar practice fields, kind of taking in, I would say, probably 10 to 15 minutes of stretching and then five-minute periods, so 25 minutes of actual individual drills. And we actually saw the offense line up and kind of go on air for a little it was
no huddle session.
No huddle session, yeah, going down the field, the ones and then the twos and then the threes. So we're going to ask you a little bit about that, but we should probably get to this first. Gabriel Rubio was back with the team on Wednesday. First time that we'd seen him really all year because he stepped away from the team in the spring, returned in the summer for workouts, and then we saw him practicing with these guys yesterday. We're not going to see him practice for the rest of fall camp, Jack, because he is out for the season, or not for the season, but for the foreseeable future, I should say, with a foot injury. Fractured his foot, had surgery. Notre Dame does expect him to be back, but he's obviously going to miss a significant amount of time. Last night on the Hey Horka show, we kind of talked about the defensive tackles and where Notre Dame is with interior defensive line depth. They're in a really good place, but what does the Gabriel Rubio situation mean for that unit?
Yeah, it's just tough for Gabriel Rubio, I think. First of all, I mean, he dealt with injuries throughout last season. It's a tough situation for him after dealing with a personal matter, being away from the team, like you said. We kind of thought after yesterday's practice that he would have to earn his place back into the defensive tackle rotation just because of the emergence of Jason Anye, Donovan Heinisch, some guys behind them, the Sean Civillanos of the world, and obviously Cross and Mills are at the top. So it was going to be an uphill battle for him, I think, anyway, and it's a devastating blow for Gabriel Rubio. But again, like you said, not out for the season. They made sure to emphasize that when we talked before practice.
I think framing it as a personal blow is probably the best way, because it reminds me of the Kahanu Kia situation where yesterday we learned that he's out for the season with an ACL injury. Just like the defensive line, the linebacker unit is loaded, and Kia was going to have a hard time kind of finding his place in the rotation. But he was going to have a chance, played well in the blue-gold game, and now he just doesn't have that chance, kind of like Rubio. Missing time, as we've seen, Rubio himself can attest to, missing time is one of the toughest things to go through if you're a player trying to rise through a depth chart, and Kia knew that as well with the mission trip that he went on. So just tough blows for those two guys. On the brighter side, Mitchell Evans is a guy that we've been following the injury status of all offseason, really dating back to late October and November of 2023 when he tore his ACL. He had a pretty significant brace on Wednesday. Jack, what was he looking like on Thursday?
No brace, and it looked like he was moving pretty well. Mitchell Evans, we didn't see the part of practice that Mitchell Evans missed yesterday, so we don't know if he was still limited or if he was a full participant, but we did see him without that brace. And I thought that was significant. He was moving pretty well. Caught a pass from Riley Leonard up the seam that I thought was a pretty nice play. It was on error, but I mean, still, it's a step in the right direction. And again, Mitchell Evans, Kevin Bauman, Benjamin Morrison, all are expected to be fully cleared by game week and when Notre Dame faces Texas A&M.
All things considered, pretty healthy squad right now. We talked to Jaden Harrison today after practice. He's a guy that went through a plantar fascia injury. He said he doesn't even remember having that injury. That was a good question by you to kind of prompt him with that answer. Riley Leonard, you mentioned, is a guy, obviously, that went through a significant injury situation in the spring. He's full go. I think Marcus Freeman, his words were, he was free to cut it loose, and we've seen that the first 2 days of practice. So all things considered, Benjamin Morrison, again today, saw him go through practice.
Probably did more than we expected yesterday.
Did more than we expected in the full practice that we got to see today in about 30 minutes. It looked like he was on pace to do that again, so he's in a really good spot. We mentioned the huddle, no huddle drives, kind of the hurry-up situations. Anything you saw from that, or there was another period? There was a period where quarterbacks were throwing to pass catchers routes on air. And then there was a period at the very end of practice, the fifth period that we got to see, with a little bit of, the defense was actually on the field. There were some linebackers, some defensive backs, and whatnot. And there wasn't much to see in that period, I would say. It looked like a check down installation, to be completely honest with you. But a couple quarterbacks took some shots, and there were some plays made. offensively and defensively. I'll start with the offensive side. Who kind of stood out? Who caught some passes?
Yeah, none of the pass catchers really honestly stood out as far as positives go. I did think Chris Mitchell. Well, obviously they like him a lot as a deep threat. He had a couple of drops. Nothing to be overly concerned about there, but that was just a note. As far as the passers, I thought that when Riley Leonard and Steve Angeli checked it underneath, they were pretty sharp. I thought Riley Leonard had a good high-low read to Jaden Thomas that stood out as impressive. Didn't really hit any deep shots. I think this, like you said, this drill is conducive to throwing it underneath. Leonard kind of forced one into double coverage that fell harmlessly to the ground on a post route to Chris Mitchell. Angeli had a miscommunication to KK Smith. Otherwise, and that pass fell incomplete away from him. Otherwise, he looked sharp. So nothing really to write home about either way with the quarterbacks and wide receivers. There was one that you saw of C.J. Carr nearly intercepted by Rod Hurd that Rod Hurd believed he should have had. But other than that, nothing really to write home about here.
You mentioned Chris Mitchell. I think the Rod Hurd play on C.J. Carr was the one that stands out the most. But if there was a runner-up, I think it was Riley Leonard taking a deep shot to Chris Mitchell, who, by my account, and we had different vantage points, was not open.
No, he was not open.
Jaden Mickey was draped on him, and Xavier Watts was coming over the top. But I think Riley Leonard, in a situation where, like we said, everyone's taking checkdowns in this period, he took a shot, and he put the ball in a place that was out of harm's way. He overshot Chris Mitchell, who was obviously covered. And if you're not throwing interceptions, I think, especially if you're a Notre Dame fan who wants to see a more prolific passing offense, you live with that kind of shot. So to me, it was just nice to see him throw that ball. Defensively, not a whole lot from this practice. So after the stretching, they went into some special teams work. And that was offense and defense actually working on, the big round tackling donut. There were offensive and defensive players working on form tackling there. Marty Biaggi was actually going through a drill that, to me, it looked like they were trying to get the Notre Dame coverage team to angle a kick returner into the corner and kind of trap him in the corner. So you had guys starting from staggered spots and going at a would-be kick returner. I thought it was very cool to see him get so engaged, and I think that's another thing that we can kind of jump into right here. Coaching staff in these first two practices have been very into these sessions, and Marty Biaggi was kind of getting on his guys because it was kind of a half-speed walkthrough type of drill, especially early on in this practice, but he made a point to say, hey, that guy who has the ball is going to be the other team's best athlete on the field every single time. It's like Jaden Harrison. That's their Jaden Harrison. You have to make sure you know what you're doing, and can we trust you? That was the word that came to mind when Marcus Freeman had his press conference the other day, is when you're looking at some of these position battles, who can we trust? That's who's going to win the position battle. And the guy that you can trust is probably the one that you don't have to get onto. And if you get onto them once, maybe you don't have to get onto them again. So, again, in the spirit of being engaged in these practices and getting onto some guys, what have you seen from the, especially the offensive coaches, in terms of like really being spirited in these practices?
Yeah, so the offense kind of started practice, after warm-ups with a little no huddle action on air, but no huddle, and the goal was basically like get set as fast as you can, run the play. And Mike Denbrock was on his guys to get set, get their assignments correctly. If someone missed an assignment, he would hear about it. Joe Rudolph on the offensive line, I thought was intense at correcting mistakes in a way that we really didn't see him last year, at least not to the same extent. I think Joe Rudolph has been more intense, the offensive line coach, this year in fall camp, especially when someone gets their gap assignment wrong, like in pass protection or in kind of like a duo scheme. Joe Rudolph has, get your eyes in the gap. Maybe a word or two missing from that, but no, and I think it's kind of in line with what was Marcus Freeman. I think his biggest criticism of the offensive line after last year, when we talked to him back in May, it was like on some obvious passing downs, Notre Dame did not do a great job picking up these blitzes and getting everyone's assignment right. And I think that's a big point of emphasis in fall camp, and it's shown with how unforgiving Joe Rudolph has been in these few practices.
Totally agree on the Rudolph point. He's been here over a year now. This feels like a different Rudolph, and I feel like he's taking it to another level. And I don't think it exactly correlates with Joe Alt not being here, Blake Fisher not being here, but this is a smart football coach realizing, like, hey, if I don't really drill this into these guys' heads, we might not look the way that we want to against Texas A&M on August 31st and even beyond that. So the coaching has been excellent. I think Marcus Freeman has had a different tone and tune and just kind of the way that he's gone about these first couple of days. So it's been interesting to see. I think everyone's realizing that this is a pretty big season, and they're really going after it because they have a team that can compete this year, and they're figuring that out in the first couple of days, and we're going to see that throughout fall camp.
Yeah, and I think I asked Mike Denbrock after practice, is the intensity level where you want it to be? And the answer he gave was like, they think they're playing hard. Which and
long pause.
Long pause, and like, does that answer your question? Yes, it does. It basically means that like player effort is not an issue. The players are playing as hard as they can. They just gotta keep getting on them to kind of push themselves. And that's kind of the thing. The coaches are not disappointed with player effort right now. They just want to push them to make it better, and to the point where they're conditioned enough to go into Texas A&M, particularly this offensive line that needs to get its assignments right against what's going to be a really good pass rush, and come out with the win. They know that like this game means a lot. Like if they get past this game, obviously the players can't think this way. They have to consider every week. We talked about this on our show last night. But if they get past Texas A&M, 12-0 is a possibility. It's a real possibility, and they know the offense is going to look better in November than it does on August 31st, and they just need to get conditioned enough to face this Texas A&M team. The emphasis on intensity, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, has been pretty clear to see so far in 2 practices.
I think everybody realizes, everybody in that facility over there realizes there's levels to this, and you can get by against some opponents, but you have a pretty good one in a hostile environment in week 1, and you only have 30 days to prepare for that. So every 5-minute period that there's only 5-minute periods, 5-minute periods that we saw today. Every single one of those mattered to them. Mm-hmm. You could tell they coached it like it, and obviously the rest of the practice probably went on the same way. So every time we are here to see some of that, we will do one of these videos and bring that to y'all here at the Blue and Gold YouTube channel. But and we'll have another one it's going to be Jack and Kyle tomorrow. I will not be here, but we will have another one on Friday, and then that will be it until I believe Tuesday of next week, which is the 6th. I don't know. I'm getting my days all mixed up. But Tuesday of next week, we'll have another one. What's that?
Magazine deadline.
Yeah, we have a lot of magazine content right from this. So busy time of year, to say the least, for the players, the coaches, and obviously the people who are covering them. So I'm Tyler Horka. That's Jack Sobel. We are Blue and Gold Illustrated, blueandgold.com. We'll see you guys next time.